Hey, U.S. history students, good to see you. And I just want to check in with you, make sure everything's going okay. I know a lot of you are continuing to plug away at OdysseyWare. I love to see that. You guys are doing a great job. I know some of the questions can be hard, and just take your time, read. What I'm going to do is start to upload some of these videos to help you with the content a little bit, to kind of give you some background on that right now. So just so you know, we're up to the quiz on the grips of the Cold War. So the rest of this week, if you just want to get yourself there, I'll unlock the quiz on Monday. Okay, so you can take that then. What I want to do though is just kind of go through a little bit of the content so you understand what's going on a little bit. Some of you do a good job with reading, some of you struggle with that. So this will be a little bit of a supplement to help you kind of plug away and figure out what you need to do. The big thing about World War II, so you remember the atomic bomb was dropped and World War II ended for us, you know, Japan surrendered. One of the things that happens right away, though, even before the war ended, was there started to be a little bit of tension between us and the Soviet Union. Now, the Soviet Union was the communist name of the country of Russia, okay? So we had not been happy when they became communist, you know, when the revolution occurred in the Soviet Union in 1917 and beyond. And when they officially became a communist nation, we didn't even recognize them as a country until the 1930s. So there's a lot of tension there. And you might ask, well, why? What was our beef with the Soviet Union? What was our issue? And so we're really different. You know, in our country, we had things like multi-political parties. Today we have Republicans and Democrats, as you're aware. We have independents and some others. But in communism, the way that they set up their system was there was only one party. So you basically, they ran your country, whether you liked it or not, okay? Also, we have free ownership of business in our country. You know, someone like Lisbeth or, you know, Abdel wanted to open up a restaurant or a store of some kind, you could. If you had enough money and you have the space and you rented it, you could do that. In the communist country, the state runs everything. So your stores wouldn't be private businesses. They would be state-run businesses. You'd go to the state's grocery store, for instance, and they would tell you what the price was. If you didn't like the prices, you couldn't go down the street to another store because that would be a state store too, and they would have the same prices. So that's the way that they kind of set up their economy, where, of course, we have free market, free enterprise. So while they're setting up state stores, McDonald's is getting started in our country, for instance. Okay. Individual rights, Bill of Rights, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of expression. They don't roll that way in the Soviet Union because that takes away from the unity of the country. They want what's good for the community, what's good for the state comes first. And if you allow things like freedom of speech, that could divide and disrupt your country. So they don't like that. And then as far as morality goes, certainly post-World War II, most, if not the overwhelming majority of our country bought into Judeo-Christian values. Okay, you didn't necessarily have to be religious, but a lot of people were. A lot of people attended church. There was an astronomical number of students who actually went to Catholic schools during this time. If you drive around Torrington, a lot of those schools are closed now. But there's a school on Pulaski Street behind where the old St. Mary's Church was. That was the school. Sacred Heart Church over on Grove Street, they had a school. St. Peter's downtown, St. Francis. So there was a lot of different Catholic schools that were even in this town that were thriving during this period. So we kind of bought into these ideas, okay, for morals. Well, in the Soviet Union, they were atheists. They advocated an atheist form of belief, which means you don't believe in a God at all. And they actually called it, Karl Marx called it the opiate of the masses, that people just made up a belief in God because it made them feel better. So we were radically different countries. Now you might say, well, why would the Soviet Union do this stuff? Like what? Well, their idea was Karl Marx's idea, who wrote Das Kapital, which was in the Communist Manifesto. These were, the idea was that you get rid of classes in society by having one class. You get rid of rich and poor, everybody's equal. And the way that you do that is you take the means of production from the business owners. The workers take over the business. So there's no bosses, there does have to be people who organize things, but the idea was that the workers do all the work and they get very little income while the boss makes it all. That should change. So the only way that that works is if you have a violent overthrow of your country. And that's what happens in the Soviet Union. And then the ultimate goal is to create this perfect kind of balance of everything. The state takes money and redistributes it equally. Okay. So the idea, a lot of people liked it, but the reality was that you're giving all of that stuff into the hands of a few people. And if they're not really good at it, or if they're not morally upstanding people, they will abuse it, and everybody ends up equally poor. And then if you want to speak out against that, they might even kill you, because now you're taking away from the good of the state. So that's what's happening in the Soviet Union. We don't like that. That scares us, actually. Okay. So as World War II ends, remember that the Soviet Union, Russia, and Germany did not get along. And sometimes students get that confused, because you have the Nazis in Germany, you have the communists in Russia. And both of them kind of limited free expression, but they were really different systems. You could have private business, for instance, in Germany. You couldn't in the Soviet Union. So each one of those warned each other about the dangers of the other type of government. So the Nazis are saying, watch out for the communists. Communists are saying, watch out for the Nazis. Well, and one thing that the Russians said was, listen, Germany attacked us twice. So as the war gets near an end, what they want to do is they want to create friendly countries near them to provide like a border, right? Similar kinds of governments tend to get along with one another. It was that idea. So places like Poland, you needed to figure out what kind of government they were going to have as the war ended. Of course, we want everybody to be free and democratic like us. Soviets had another idea. And so what ends up happening is the continent of Europe ends up getting divided between the free West and the communist East. Okay. So Poland is an example where they end up becoming communist. Okay. Now, this also scared somebody like Winston Churchill, who was in charge of, who's the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And so he called it like an iron curtain. He said, we have the West and the East, and it's almost like this iron curtain has drawn down to separate the two sides. And iron you can't really get through. So these poor countries are behind this iron curtain that the Soviet Union's in charge of, and the free West can't get in to help them. They can't get out to get help. So he was worried about that. Okay. And that's going to dictate the next 40 years of our foreign policy. We're worried about it too. And also at this time, so remember that the nations that warred against each other in World War II, people finally said, you know what, this whole idea of getting colonies and all these countries trying to get bigger and bigger empires and then fighting one another is not a good thing. So they advocated for the free future of these colonies, where they're going to get their freedom and they're going to become their own independent countries, and that they're going to kind of go on their own way. They're going to be given freedom and independence. That works in some places, it doesn't work in others. So for instance, there were about 50 African nations that gained their independence following World War II. Remember that countries like Italy owned places like Ethiopia, for instance. If you go there today, there are probably still people there that speak Italian, which a lot of times we don't have that view of Africa. But certainly there's German spoken, there's French, there's English, Italian, Spanish. Okay, so there's a lot of different languages in Africa, and largely that's because they were owned by a lot of these European powers. And what they really wanted here was they wanted some written constitutions, they wanted trade, but this became an area just like Europe. People started to worry that the Soviet Union was going to try to make some of these nations communists. We were going to try to make them free. Okay, so that's kind of what's happening at the end of World War II, and your first lesson kind of deals with that. What are we going to do in Europe? What are we going to do in Africa? What do we do all over the world as these nations get their freedom? And so this is what we mean by Cold War. So we are not fighting the Soviets head on, like in the little graphic you get, the boxing gloves coming together. We're trying to fight them by getting influence over other countries in terms of which way are they going to choose to go, communism or freedom or democracy. And if you understand that, you understand the Cold War, basically. We get involved in wars all over the world to stop the communists from spreading their influence. Now, most of the time, we thought that the communists were actually causing communist movements to happen in these countries, when in some cases that's not true. It just happened. But we always assumed that the Soviets were behind it. So we'd get our troops there. Before you know it, we had wars in places like Korea and Vietnam and other places. Korea will be a little more obvious what's happening there. But Vietnam, questions that are starting to be answered today is we're starting to realize that the Soviet Union may not have been the primary mover of everything that happened there. That a lot of times it came up from their own people, because the people wanted to see things equal. They saw a few people really wealthy and everybody else really poor. And so what they wanted was to change that. So a lot of times communism appealed to them. They understood it. And in the East, with community, okay, they value the community over the individual. They like the idea of communism there too, where with capitalism, which is the economic system in our democracy, it's more about individual rights and freedom. So there was a real thing that appealed to them just because of the way that they lived. If that makes sense to you, I hope it does. So that's the Cold War, and it's basically going to manifest itself in multiple ways. It's going to make us afraid, because you're going to see that the Soviets get their hands on nuclear weapons too. So, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Are they going to blow us up, or are we going to blow them up? And so that's really what this unit is about, and how it plays itself out throughout our world. So take your time reading, and hopefully what I said to you will help. Let me know if you want me to post some videos. I can do that too, to help you understand this period, and it will help. Okay, but keep up. I'd love to see the names. I'm seeing, I don't want to mention everybody because I'm afraid I'm going to leave somebody out. But a lot of you keep coming back and doing the lessons and getting better at it. Don't be discouraged if you get a low grade. We'll work it out, and keep plugging away. Okay. I miss everybody a lot, and I even miss, I'm hearing the wind outside right now. But geez, I wish we were in our classroom. I could open the windows up and listen to them slam, and and those things. And some of you talk about how hot you are, others you're going to be freezing, and and all of that. So I do miss everybody, and hope to see you soon. And I hope this helps. Okay, take care.